she had 2 sons, which became 3 tribes, and her sister had 9 tribes. So you see that what she was prepared to give. So the Baruch Shalom says, and it's a famous psukim, beautiful psukim in Yirmiyah, it says, Rachel Mavaker Abanel, that Rachel was crying for her children, May ano lehit nachem. She refused to be consoled. She said, the Baruch Shalom, you got to do something. And the pasuk says, "V'shavu banim agvulam," that the children will return to their boundaries. So you see, that was what she was able to do. And what does it teach us? It teaches us that a person has to be able to mevateir. Mevateir means like to give up, and the person to be selfless, or a person to be prepared to think of somebody else. And that's what the Rabbi Shalom wants us. Hashem wants us to think of other people, to do the right things. And a similar idea is to also mention the famous story of Kamsa. By Kamsa, we know there was a wedding and a big affair, and this fellow who was in charge of the balabos, his big mate was Kamsa, and his enemy was Bar Kamsa, the son of Kamsa. And his butler went and took the invitation to the wrong fellow. And Bar Kamsa came. And you know the whole story, that he says, give me food, I'll pay for my food, I'll pay for the chasana, half, I'll pay for the whole thing, but just don't shame me in front of all these people. And the guy didn't care. So just to think into it is that Bar Kamsa, he came, what was wrong with the balabos telling him, I don't want you here. Many times we have faribos with people, and we really should make up, but we have faribos, and we don't invite this person, they didn't invite me. This person put me at the back of the hall, so I'm going to put him outside, So there are people who don't, they take a thing like that. So over here, maybe Bar Kamsa was someone that he did business with. And Bar Kamsa took him for a ride and cost him a lot of money. So now Bar Kamsa turns up. So he's correct to be angry and to tell him to leave. But you know what the chap is? The chap is Bar Kamsa came, probably brought a present. He was so happy to come. He said that my friend wants to make up. He says, I'm prepared to make up. And he came to the chasana, and what happened? He was thrown out. See, that's a terrible thing. That's an interesting insight into what was behind the scenes. Behind the scenes is that the fella did come, and he did look for some sort of coming together. And yet, the balabos would rather that the fellow leave with a lot of his dignity being sullied and being hurt, and he wasn't refused. And of course, the Gemara says that the Rabbonim were there, but that we're not going into. But the main thing is that we see that, unfortunately, there were bad midos. I was just listening, today's Daf Yomi is in Shabbos, Kufla Meches. I was just listening that what was bad, they had Dayonim, they had Talmidei Chachomim, they had so many things. But the Gemara says in Shabbos, and this is really an insight, he says that the people came to the Beis Din, so they said, it costs a lot of money to have a Beis Din. So, look, Beis Din has to charge, but it depends how much is charged, and also if people are taking advantage. So the people had to charge. Then they had the din Torah. He says, okay, what's the psak? Who's right or wrong? He says, we're not telling you the psak until you pay up. You need psak money, right? The psak means to tell what was the decision. He says, we want a couple of bob for that. So it was another thing. And then it seems that the Dayanim, they allowed this to happen, and maybe they took a cut. So it can happen where everybody's from, and everybody's doing the right thing. But at the same time, you feel that maybe they're taking advantage of you. Like I shouldn't say, but I'm sure it doesn't apply to all people, but we who are living in Eretz Yisrael are called chutznik. You know what a chutznik is? A chutznik is a person who comes from the outside. And you come from the outside and you sort of wonder if, the guy's going to take advantage. So there are some camp drivers that do take advantage. We went to the coastal not long ago. On the way there, the guy we were in the parking lot, but just to get to the coastal, he wanted 50 shkolim. On the way back, the guy charged about 30 or 35 shkolim. So, so who was the good guy? But I think the first guy, I think I asked my wife, I think he was an Arab. I think he was, you've got to be careful. If you get into Arab camp and, they say, well, we won't look at it'll cost you 50 shekels and we won't look at the meter. And then sometimes you say, no, I want the meter. The guy take you out town first. Take you all the way around Jerusalem till you get to your destination, which was around the block. So you don't know, but if you're a chutznik, but unfortunately that happens. It happens that people take advantage of other people. And the Gemara says so, and it's terrifying. And then the Gemara said something also, which was an insight, and you think of it, he says that Bote Midrashim were destroyed, houses were destroyed. But why was it like that? I mean, in the Gemara, and the Gemara Gittin explains that there were so many children learning and the class after class and etc. etc. It could be that these big edifices were built on stolen money, on money that was taken from people, not with their consent, but they were forced. So Hashem didn't like that. So Hashem is forcing us to be on a different level. And it could be that, well, like everybody's talking about this idea of what's happening with the coronavirus. It's pushing us into the houses. It's we're not being able to do exactly what we want to do. People are getting tired, they're getting impatient, the kids don't know what to do. There used to be a time that it was such a pleasure not to go to school. Right now, the kids, mummies want to go back to school. They want to see their friends. Like us, they only can see their friends on a Zoom, So it's quite a difficult situation. But, we have to, like we mentioned last week on Friday when I spoke to Shul, that at least everybody's learning Torah and listening to the Zoom and doing the right thing. And that should be a zchus for all of us. The topic that was publicized was building on previous giants. When we do something, we build on something. And they said that the shul is having a AGM. It's interesting that when they built a new shul and they wanted to expand, and I'm sure now that people, wanted to feel free to expand without different people, with other people who were there for many years, so that they can do what they want to do. And there was a suggestion that since it's such a new start, let's call it year one of Sentin Shul. Yeah. And I was absolutely against it. Violently against it. Why? Because what about all the people who put in the groundwork? I mean, we daven in tents. We daven in the Jewish Guild. We daven at on the property. Things weren't as easy, and they have a nice, the big dining room. They have all the facilities that we have. So these were the people with the really foundation to what we have now. So therefore we build on that which was before. So when we look at history, today's today, today's the present. Everybody says it's a present to have today, Baruch Hashem, it's a present. And then tomorrow is the future. And the question is, when you come to tomorrow, so how do you look at yesterday? So yesterday was history, right? So what do you do? So it's not worth it. It's just finished, or do you have to think about what happened yesterday? So in Pirkei Avot, it says, "Eizer Chochem harois hanola." Who's a Chochem who sees the future? Hanola. So it's like playing chess. When you play chess, if you're an average player, so you move, and then the other person moves, and you think, okay, now let me think what I'm going to move, right? So you think move from move to move. A person who's a master, good player, he's 5 moves ahead. He moves, he works out in his brain, you're going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then by then I'm going to wham you, because I'm going to do something that you didn't even think of. So Eizer Chochem harois hanola. If you want to be successful, you have to look at the future. And that's very important. However, when you look at the future, it's look what's happening right now. Everybody's been looking at the future, right? Whether it's here, all over the world, building businesses, putting money into stocks, buying new things, investing, right? Comes COVID-19, comes the virus, and it's all lost. And it's all, you're devastated when you're starting from the beginning. So who's a Chochem harois hanola, if you could see the future? But we all cannot really see the future, but it is important to be able to think in the future. But as important is to look at the past. So the word in Pirkei Avot, Eizer Chochem harois hanola, is the past. What happened in the past? What happened yesterday and the day before? This is a cute anecdote of a young man who got a job in a huge firm. So one day he went over, knocked on the door of his boss, who was sitting behind a big desk, smoking a big fat cigar. You could see a luxurious office. He had built an empire. So he says, boss, he says, tell me, how did you do it? How did you do it? How did you make so much money, and how did you build this empire? So the guy said to him, good decisions, good decisions. I made good decisions. He says, oh, he says, and how did you make good decisions? He said, bad decisions, right? He made the bad decisions in the past, but then he built on the past. And he learned from what he had done in the past. And therefore he was able to make amends and do the right things in the future. So therefore we always have to look to the past. Again, that this is really part of the Torah. Because in the Torah, it says, towards the end of the Torah, it says, Sha'al avicha, after ask your father, v'yageilach, right? And he will tell you, Zekainecho, and even go another generation behind and ask your bobbas and zaydas, right? and they will tell you. In other words, that when you want to know, and it's talking about Bnei Yisrael, that their history and how they're able to come and to leave Mitzrayim and to get Eretz Yisrael and everything, is ask what happened in the past. Ask to happen with the difficult times and the future. So you see it's in the Torah. So there's a beautiful Medrash Tanchuma. The Medrash Tanchuma in Parshas Masa. And Parshas Masa is when the Bnei Yisrael related how they went through 42 stages before they got to Eretz Yisrael from Mitzrayim. So, and you had the names. So, where they stopped. So, you can combine it really with the Parshas Dvarim, which we are on now, Dvarim. That Moshe Rabbeinu, when he spoke Eila Dvarim, we're going to get to Moshe in a moment. So he says Eila Dvarim Shedibi Moshe, and he says, and he also mentions places where they stopped. Di Zahav, we were in this place, and they were in Shittim in that place. So why was he saying all what happened in the past? Because and these names were they camouflaged what really happened. The word Di Zahav is Dai Zahav. They had too much gold because they had all the gold from the Yam Suf, or the horses of the Egyptians. They were laden with gold, and what they took from him in Mitzrayim. They went and built. What did they do? They built a golden calf. So he was reprimanding Bnei Yisrael. He was reprimanding the Israel in all the different places. They said there was no water. They said there was no meat. They said that they were oiskamated, traveling through the desert and all those places. So Moshe Rabbeinu, he recapped those places, right? So our same scene. He went to the past. So this Medrash Rabbi Tanchuma, which is brought down in Rashi, in Parshas Masai, is a fabulous insight. He says, the Rabbi Tanchuma says, it's compared to a father whose son had a terrible disease, and he had to take him to a faraway place in order to go and heal him. And then they were there, it took time to get there. On the way back, so the father was speaking to his son. He says, do you remember when we were here a couple of months ago? He says, yes. He says, here we slept. Then went a little bit further, and he says, do you remember this place? It was ice cold. We were so bitterly cold. He says, yes, I remember. I went a little further, and he says, do you remember that place? That's where we slept. And another place, he says, you had a terrible headache. You had a headache. You weren't feeling good. It was all on the way. He says, but we recap. Don't forget the nisyonos. Don't forget the hardships that a person had to go through in order to come to where we are today. They're hardships, but you have to build on those hardships, because a simple reason is because we went through hardships and we were delivered and we were saved. And who saved us? It's the Rabbanu Shalom, right? If you go with God, so then you're successful. So it's important to remember those things. So therefore, whatever a person does in life, so a person has to build on the past. You have to build on the past, and then you'll be successful. The same thing, just a simple lesson for all of us in the midst of kibbut avayim, to honor parents. That people, you learn so much from your parents. Sometimes people don't realize what they do. So there's another cute anecdote of a guy. He was 17 years old, 16, 17. And, he thought he was a big shot. He was riding a trick or bagrut or in a shiva or somewhere, and he was learning, and his father had a good business and was quite successful. And he, in his mind, used to think, how did my father make this? How did he make the money? How did he build it? Because in his mind, he would have done this, he would have done that. And he thought that his father wasn't as smart as he was, education that he was getting, and et cetera, et cetera. And came 3 years later, he was already 20 years old, and then he noticed that his father had made good decisions, and was quite a wise man. So what did he say? He says, "Oi, my father in 3 years must have learned so much. When he was 17, he thought he knew more. And he says, no, in 3 years, and I turned 20. Right? Sometimes we don't appreciate what we have, and that is building on the past. To look at the past on a Rabbi, on a Rosh Yeshiva. Sometimes the person's merits to be amongst in a yeshiva where the Rosh Yeshiva was a person who was Adam Gadol Ma'od, a great person, a personality. He taught and he showed by example, sometimes in a shul, that the Rav could be someone who says, I would like to emulate that person. Person could have a teacher who was so kind and so good and did the right things. And I must say that I'll just mention it because maybe I even mention the name, they'll feel good and make sure they get the thing, that Melker's wife, she's a nursery school teacher, and a person after he was married and a successful man looked her up and came to thank her, that because in nursery school he felt that she set him on the right path. Imagine. But that's such a wonderful thing, and that's such a lesson for us. Just to take another just 5 minutes, we have been going pretty good, but I feel I just have to mention this idea also, because again, it's something which you can take home a beautiful message. It says, Eilu hadvarim asher diber Moshe. These are the words that Moses spoke. Moses spoke. But Moses, when he met the Rabbanu Shalom at the burning bush, so what happened? He said, Lo ish dvarim anochi. Hashem said, they debated. Should he go? Should he not go? He says, Rabbanu Shalom, who am I? He says, I'm not a speaker. I'm not a spokesman for Klal Yisrael. How can I go? La ish dvarim. And what happened? The famous Medrash is that when he was a little boy and he was found by Batya, she brought him to the palace. So the magicians in the palace felt that there was somebody over here that may usurp, take over the power of Paro, which happened. And so he said, this little boy that she is nursing, who is he? So they took a crown and they took a coal and they put Moshe Rabbeinu in front of it. And Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, as a young child, wanted to take the crown, which would mean, Pharaoh, you better watch out. This guy's taking over. Right? Instead of that, he took the coal, put it to his mouth, and he burnt his tongue. And the Malach stopped him from taking the crown and pushed his hand to the coal. But so therefore, that was the reason that perhaps he wasn't linguistic enough to be able to speak as well. But now that was the past. Now let's look at this week's parsha. Nachamo, Eila advarim asher diber Moshe. These are the words that Moshe spoke. Well, he's become a great speaker. Where did he learn it from? Right? Where did he learn it from? And also, it says, Oz Yoshe Moshe. Moses sang V'nai Yisrael and the children of Israel. It became a chazan. Not only a Rav, but a Chazan also, right? He could get a double salary in a shul in Chutz La'aretz, the rabbi and the Chazan, right? So we need to learn it from all of that. So I'll just mention something that my wife mentioned. I told her what I was going to say. She said that all of Bnei Israel at Har Sinai, it says they were healed. So anybody had something which was a defect, so now everybody was wholesome, right? So could be that's where you got it from. But together with that, there's a great difference before Torah and after Torah. Before Har Sinai and after. Before the breaking or the cutting or the parting of the Yam Suf, and afterwards. That Moshe was inspired from the miracles, from what he saw, and from the Yad Hashem, and then from Torah. He came down with the Ten Commandments. He had what to say. And just think of this. Do you know that we say it every single day in Shema? It says, V'dibata bom. You should speak on Torah. V'lechtecho b'derech, when you're going by the way. V'shoch b'cho, when you're lying down. U'v'kumecha, when you get up. So when you have time for yourself. So of course you're allowed to have a run, right? Mr. Swain, I don't know if you're still running, right? But a runner all his life. You're allowed to have a run. You're allowed to go to a gym. You're certain you should take care of yourself. Absolutely. And tell everybody who's staying at home and eating, like all of us, be careful. Make sure that you go for a walk, go for a run, do a little bit of exercise. Otherwise, you'll have to roll out of your houses the time when we're all free. But he had, Moshe Rabbeinu had Torah. And when you have Torah, you have content. You have what to say. You have the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, the series of Dibros, he gave it to not only to Bnei Israel, but to the whole of the nations of the world. We have to teach them. Shabbos, which was written in the beginning, not that they should keep Shabbos like we Shabbos, but that there's a day of rest. They realize that Hashem created the world and rested on a day, and that they just should know the concept. So, and it's in all these beautiful parshas in Dvorim. It says when the nations will see and learn our mitzvahs, they'll say, "Rak am chacham gadol." What a wise and great nation and understanding people we are. Why? Because we have what to say. If you listen to many times when at the United Nations, what do they do at the United Nations? They spend all the time condemning Israel. The nations of the world, what are they giving? What is Iran giving to the world? What is Syria giving to the world? What is Hamas giving to the world? What's England giving to the world? Hatred. What's America giving to the world with all their problems, right? Racial hatred. Well, what do we give to the world? Culture. 10 commandments. Don't kill. Don't steal. Everything. Any type of real culture in the world is only coming values, which has come from Bnei Israel. And David HaMelech said in the Tilim, then he says that when he went and he had to speak to the nations of the world, he also had a League of Nations. They also had most probably a United Nations, right, of all the other people. David HaMelech could come and he had something to say. He had something to say. Because he had ethics, he had morals. What did they say? Nothing. If you look, it's terrible. If you look in South Africa and you watch Parliament between the different sects over there, shouting, fighting, throwing each other out of their Parliament and just bringing up racial hatred, that's all they can do. Why the guy, I won't say his name, well, his name. I don't want him to send some of his henchmen to look me up, but you know, can't stand a white man, can't stand this, can't stand that. I mean, it's 20 years since apartheid's gone. You know, get on with it. Build, help. You know, don't say, just don't breed more hatred and more hatred and more hatred. But we thank God we B'nai Yisrael have something so different. And we have what to say. So David HaMelech, when he had to speak to the kings of the Middle East, you know, he had culture, he had something to say. So that's our theme of tonight. Our theme tonight is we build on the past. We look back, and from what we see in the past, we'll be able to go into the future. We'll be successful. And I'll mention another name also, because the Gemara says it's a mitzvah to mention names, especially a person does something good. But Rabbi David Lappin, you know him very, very well. His father learned where I learned in Tells. So he's that for many years, I don't know if he still does it, you know, he's a Rav in Yerushalayim, in Ranana. So his work was to go to the different companies, secular companies, and give them talks on business ethics. Right? And where does business ethics? We have all the Baba Metzia, Baba Kama, Baba Basra, the Choshe Mishpat. Who has business ethics like B'nai Israel? We far surpass any other nations of the world of what we have to offer to the nations of the world. So we can be proud of who we are, and please God, the Avraham should be proud of us that we listen to the Zoom, we listen to Shirim, that we realize that we have a lesson we have to learn, and please God that we should all be healthy and well, and please God get over Tisha B'Av, over the fast, come to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and be signed and sealed for a good year. Thank you. Okay, that's it for tonight.